March 11th, 2015. A day Rose Martin remembers well. 3 of her sons were playing by the stream that runs through the backyard of their Mifflinburg, Pennsylvania home.
It was one of the first warm days, and obviously that's a lot of the reason. The children were so anxious to be outside, and I had supper on, and I was just ready to call them in for supper, actually. I heard this blood-curdling scream.
It came from her son, Greg. 2-year-old Gardell was missing. They didn't realize he had fallen into the icy stream that had become swollen from the winter thaw. After Rose and her 6 other children searched every inch of the 3-acre property, she called 911. Rose also called her husband Doyle, a truck driver who was 3 hours away.
We knew there was nothing more we could do. I knew there was help on the way. The children were just crying, and I just gathered the children around me. We just prayed that God would help us be calm and that someone could find Gardell.
That somebody was a neighbor who had joined the search. He found Gardell farther downstream, trapped in the fence line. He carried the toddler's lifeless body to the road just as EMS arrived. EMT Anthony Paralia was first on the scene.
After doing some pretty quick assessment, realized that he was in cardiac arrest, and just immediately started CPR. At that point, I really didn't see a dead 2-year-old. I saw life in his little eyes.
Even then, he knew it was a race against the clock. Gardell was taken to Evangelical Community Hospital in nearby Lewisburg. Dr. Frederick Lapp was on the team who continued CPR and attempted to warm the boy's body.
Pretty grim. There are cases that we all read about in medical school and in training, and severe hypothermic patient survives, but it's still the great exception to the rule.
On the way there, Rose learned that Gardell would have to be life-flighted to Geisinger Hospital, a level 1 trauma center in Danville, Pennsylvania.
I just felt again and again like God was saying, just give him over to me. And when it came down to it, I had no other choice. It was out of my control.
Waiting for life flight was EMT Perilia and paramedic Howie Mast, who also responded to the emergency call.
I said to someone that night after we walked away, and I said, if he lives, it'll be nothing short of a miracle.
At Geisinger, staff continued with CPR. By now, it had been over an hour since Gardell had a pulse, and Dr. Richard Lambert was having difficulty starting an IV.
They were doing such effective CPR, it was really bouncing little Gardell around to make sure that the heart was being compressed properly. I did have to have him stop very briefly a couple times to allow me to get that needle in.
There was another concern. Gardell's blood pH had become acidic, a clear indication of oxygen deprivation. The number alarmed Dr. Frank Maffei.
It was the lowest I've ever seen. And I remember seeing that, and I remember looking at Dr. Lambert and saying, 6.5, Rich, we're in a tough spot here.
All this time, the Martins Church had been praying, and other churches throughout central Pennsylvania had joined them. Now en route to Geisinger, Rose had received no word on Gardell's condition.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go through your mind. You just wonder if your life will ever, go back to normal, if you always realize there's people that do lose their children, and it's a reality, but it's always someone else.
When Rose arrived, she learned Gardell had not responded to treatment and had been taken to surgery for a cardiopulmonary bypass. It was his last hope. Then as the surgeon was about to begin, Doctors Maffei and Lambert said wait.
Literally with our cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Russ Carter, scrubbed and ready to cannulate for that procedure. We did a last pulse check.
The team stopped CPR.
Ultimately, not only did we get a pulse, but we got a pulse that really was indicative of a heart that was recovering.
It was a good sign, but Gardell had been without a pulse for 1 hour and 41 minutes, and doctors were very concerned about brain damage. Then Gardell showed them that there was hope.
This child's trying to open his eyes, and we just clung to that hope.
With each passing hour, Gardell improved more quickly than doctors could have hoped for.
And he's just getting better and better, and so his rate of recovery, I think, was stunning.
2 days later, he went home.
So we went sort of from shock and suspense to almost a high, like, this is just unreal.
It's been 6 weeks since Gardell's brush with death, and he's returned to his big backyard and playing with his brothers and sisters. Most likely he won't remember, but others will.
When I think about God's presence in this, it's hard for me to reconcile that it all happened by chance.
He was dead for an hour and 41 minutes by all the measures that we measure life. So for him to ultimately survive neurologically intact, you have to give some credit to some divine intervention. You really have to.
She's getting scared.
Just to realize the power of God. We just had no question that it was an answer to prayer.